Hello, I'm Damon Thomas. I'm here with Dr. Bridgette today. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you.
How are you
I
doing?
appreciate you inviting me.
Good.
I'm excited. I really am. I know we've been talking for about 3 years,
Yes.
4 years.
Yes.
And I know you've been trying to encourage me to kind of come out and do my interview, and many reasons why I just couldn't, but I think the timing is right, and I'm excited to be able to do this today.
Awesome. And like you said, we've been going back and forth for about 3 years. Initially, I reached out to you regarding my Men of Courage program.
Yes.
I put it in your eyes, your ears, and see if you wanted to come on board to be a therapist for my Men of Courage program, and we continue to grow from there. So today we're going to talk about several things. We're going to talk about who you really are, who Dr. Bridgette is. We're going to talk about the success you had in Virginia, the bills that were passed.
Yes.
We're going to talk about why you have a passion for the vets.
Yes.
You know, and also finally the death of your husband.
Yes.
We're going to touch on that. Such a tragic part of your life. Let's talk about your upbringing. What was Dr. Bridgette's upbringing like?
Wow. I'm going to say I come from humble beginnings. I mean, really, I didn't have this silver spoon in my mouth type of upbringing. I had an actually terrible upbringing. My childhood, my dad was an alcoholic. My mother was an absentee mother, even though she was a nurse, but she was an absentee mother. She really wasn't there. She wasn't there because she was too busy having to work. Not only did she have to work, because my dad was an alcoholic, he drank up all the money.
Wow.
I came from a family where my dad was very abusive, physically abusive, emotionally abusive towards us. He was kind of individual that what he would do, he'd wait until my mother would leave and he would beat up on us.
Wow.
He'd come in midnight. You know, we had this thing, we knew if he did not come home by midnight, we didn't go to bed. We didn't go to bed because we knew he was going to pull us out of the bed by our feet and abuse us, throw us all throughout the whole house, just beat us up. And then, you know what, can you imagine going through that and then have to get up the next day to go to school?
Right. How old were you when you were going through this abuse?
I can remember, I can go as far as maybe about 6, 7 years old. I can go as far back, maybe that's about my I can recall. But he was not a very nice man at all. He was a full-fledged alcoholic. Matter of fact, I have a family of addiction.
Okay.
My grandfather was an alcoholic, and his father was an alcoholic as well. It was one of those things where they just didn't get any help, none whatsoever. The abuse just continued to go on. But my upbringing was not the best though, but obviously I thank God I'm here.
Okay.
I managed to heal beyond it, but it was not one of those upbringings that you really want to talk about. But one thing I did not allow it to do was to cripple me.
Good.
Wasn't gonna let it cripple me, because even though I had a terrible childhood, I made something of myself.
Okay.
I made something of myself. I love it.
And how long did the abuse go on for?
Oh gosh, I'm gonna say I was about 12 or 13 years old when my mother finally just said, you know what, she had enough. But you know what, this is what I like for parents to understand. Children would rather come from a broken home than to live in a very dysfunctional home. And I think the fact that she stayed so long, some of it, even though she was a nurse, I think that she was afraid to leave.
She was afraid to leave.
She was afraid to leave. Sometimes when you've been living in a very dysfunctional environment, you get used to living that way.
Okay.
She stayed a lot in D.C. She's from Washington, D.C., but she stayed a lot there because she had siblings there. And so I cannot imagine leaving your home. She'd make an excuse, not an excuse, but she would work. She'd work the night shift hours. And that was her reason. I think that was her escape. And then she'd get off from work, and then she'd go stay at maybe a brother's house, or she didn't have a sister there, but she had a brother there, and she'd stay there and just sleep. And then she'd get up and she'd do it all over again. And by the time she got to us, maybe it could have been about 5 days later.
Wow. So did she ever console you guys and say she's sorry that this abuse was going on?
She knew that he was abusing us physically and emotionally. She knew this. But I think that she felt powerless. There was not much she could do. We found out years later, not to me, but there were some unspeakable things that he'd done to my older sister and my oldest brother. And I don't think she knew. I just don't think so. I did not experience that. I did experience the physical abuse, But as far as anything else was concerned, I can't really speak on that, but I do know that it did happen.
Okay. So was any incest going on, any sexual abuse going on, to your knowledge?
Well, this is what my older sister came out and said, that he obviously sexually abused her for years. She said she could go as far as back, I think she said she was about 9 years old. And she thought something was rather odd. We were living in Alexandria, Virginia at that time, and what happened was, from my understanding, he threw my mother out, and then what he decided to do was he shipped off my siblings except her, and she thought something was not right.
Okay.
Something was strange. She was in the house by herself, and she didn't know. And from my understanding, there was a lot that transpired, and this was years later. And I also had learned, we talking 30-something years later, that the abuse had happened with my older sibling as well, my older brother.
Wow.
But we didn't really talk about it because I didn't know. Okay. Nobody knew.
Okay. As you became an adult, what type of impact did the abuse have on you?
One thing I did learn was being in that type of a toxic environment, what happened was I developed an anxiety disorder. And we are the byproduct of our own environment. Children that come from a home environment where there's a lot of chaos, abuse, yelling, screaming, hollering, you learn to adapt to the environment. Meaning is that you are a child, you are seen, but you're not heard.
Okay.
So if you think about it, you have to learn to develop a skill. That's a coping mechanism. So
Right.
you learn to maneuver or navigate throughout your own home. And that's kind of what happened with me. And then I noticed that I had a lot of fears, and years later, and I had a lot of deep insecurities. But it all morphed into having an anxiety disorder.
Okay.
But again, I thank God where I am today. I mean, I learned to just develop much more stronger coping mechanisms, went through some heavy therapy. And this came from years of just feeling like something wasn't right.
Okay. So you say therapy, did you have to go to therapy for suicide, anxiety, depression?
Well, it was a combination of both.
Okay.
And it didn't come out until years later when I had my first child. I had 3 sons. I had my first son. It didn't really come out then. Let me tell you when it really came out. It came out when my husband and I, we got married very young. And I remember having to leave my hometown. And he said, well, honey, he says, we're going to be moving to, I was only moving to Washington, D.C., my gosh. It's not like I didn't live there, I've lived there as a kid. But when he said, oh, well, honey, we got our first duty station, it's going to be in D.C. Oh, my gosh, you would have thought that he would have said, honey, we're moving on the moon somewhere. I was so upset about it. And I just had a lot of fear, a lot of panic, a lot of anxiety. But I did move.
Okay.
But then I managed to deal with what I was dealing with, the emotional aspect of it. But it really didn't kick in until I had my third child, and we were living in South Carolina.
Okay.
Beaufort, South Carolina. That's when it really kicked in. And I ended up writing a book. My book is going to be published soon.
Awesome.
It's called The Shepherd's Pie.
Congratulations.
But the thing was, I ended up having an attempt to commit suicide. It was quite a few dynamics that kind of went on for me to even make that attempt.
Okay.
Obviously, I wasn't very successful at it because I'm still sitting here to this day.
Yes. So things got really out of hand.
It did.
Got out of hand.
God.
And how long were you away from your family? You went into a facility, correct?
I did.
Okay.
It was called Fenwick Hall Hospital.
Okay.
And matter of fact, Mary and Barry went there. It was a drug and a rehab facility that was there for patients that were co-occurring, which means that you have a substance abuse disorder as well as a mental health disorder. Obviously, I didn't have any substance abuse disorder,
Right.
but I was there for the mental health aspect.
Exactly.
I was there for at least 30 days. 30 days I was there. I was there because, again, I had the thoughts of wanting to kill myself. I made an attempt. Obviously, it wasn't very successful. The military stepped in. And I didn't think I was going to be leaving to be gone that long, but it took a while for them to put me on the right medication to get things adjusted for me to start feeling better. But I thank God, you know, that is a time in my life where I'm thankful because it opened up my eyes with a lot of things about my life. Now, here we go. Even though my childhood was rocky and it was crazy, let me tell you what I had in my heart, Damon. I remember as a kid, I said to myself, you know, whenever I get out this situation, it was in my head space. I said, I'm going to become something and I'm going to start helping people.
Wow.
Originally, I said I wanted to be a social worker.
Okay.
But I didn't end up being a social worker. I ended up being a mental health therapist.
Right.
That's
Right.
the interesting about it.
Right.
Not only that, I started out actually as a coach.
Okay.
And then I said I wanted to be a motivational speaker. Well, that didn't materialize, but I ended up just staying in mental health, period.
Okay.
I don't change anything. I have no regrets about any aspect of my life
Okay.
because it opened up my eyes and it helped me to grow as a person.
Okay. Let's go back to real quick. You stay in a facility for what, 30 days?
I was at Finley Hall for at least 30 days.
What did that do to you being away from your husband and your children? What did that do to you?
Oh, wow. Well, to be honest with you, I was scared to death because you know what? I was thinking back like 1950s and 60s, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go in this place, I'm never gonna come out. Well, that's my crazy way of thinking, you know. Things have changed since then.
Right.
Nobody gets shock therapy.
Right.
That's what I was thinking. But really, when I got there, you know, I ended up having a lot of good friends there. I realized we all had the same issues, but yet, you know, there were people there was a doctor that was there. There was a doctor that was at the facility. There were nurses that was there at the facility, like literally there as patients. And they had problems just like everybody else.
Right.
And I got to know them. They were really good friends of mine. So we all kept in contact with one another as well, too. But being at that facility, it was scary at first.
Okay.
And I missed my children. My children were very small. I think my youngest was like 2, 4, and I think either 8 or 9 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, they were very small. And my husband, he was a leading, I think he was an E6 at that time, but he was running the clinic.
Okay.
And so it was very stressful on him. You know, I ain't gonna lie, he was really upset. Like look, when you coming about this place?
Come out this place. Right. Okay.
And you know, because it was, to me, it was a safe haven. It was like being in a little cocoon.
Right.
And I think it's good and bad with facilities. Like, let me explain why. Because, you know, they tailor your whole day out for you.
Oh, yeah.
It's all tailored out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you go here, you got therapy, you know, you have a journal writing hour, you go to AA meetings or NA meetings or EA meetings, whatever. Now, your whole day is planned out.
Right.
When you tell you when to eat, when not to eat, here's your snacks, here's this, here's that. But the whole world doesn't revolve like that.
Right.
You know, it's wonderful because some people need it at that time, but let me tell you what the problem was, is when you have to transition out and you have to go back to the real world. The real world is not like, here's your snack,
right,
and here's this, and here's your meeting. You have to learn to incorporate those things back into your life.
Right.
And I was kind of scared because that was something like, oh my gosh, I've been in a very safe environment for all this time, and now I have to leave.
Okay.
And it was scary. And I'll never forget these words. I remember Dr. Leonard. Dr. Leonard, she was a female psychiatrist, and she was there with us. And we would sit in group. We would sit around in a little circle together, and everybody would spill their marbles out. So we would say, spill your marbles out. And then, you know, when it was time for us, she said, okay, guys, like, somebody's over there crying. They just spilled their guts out. She said, okay, no, everybody come on. Everybody got to go and go back to your rooms. I'm like, what the hell? Are you kidding me?
Right.
We spill our guts out. Now we got to pick up all of our marbles and get it back together and then go back into our rooms and do what we needed to do. But I remember, I'll never forget, when it was time for me to leave, and we sat down, and she said, I can tell you're really scared. I said, I am, Dr. Leonard. And she said, are those your children? I said, yeah, those are my kids. And she said, you know, I want to share something with you. And I said, what? And she said, I too, as a psychiatrist, was depressed as well. And you know, when she said that, Damon, it gave me hope.
Yes.
She shared a piece of information with me that she let me know, I understand what you're going through. I got it.
Got it.
But she was also teaching us in group, this is life.
It's like,
You know what, you have to spill your guts, and you got to pick them back up, and then you have to get yourself back together, and you have to get back out there on life. But she also told me, she says, look, medication plays only about 10%. 10%. It does help. Either you can go home and you can go back, do what you were doing before. You were in bed in a fetal position and you was depressed. And you can take medication, and guess what? You'll stay depressed.
stay depressed.
Or you can go home and you can do something different.
Right.
And to me, I was saying, I didn't get it at the time. But it was interesting. When my husband, we were driving out of Fenwick Hall Hospital, it was like they had these big, huge golden gates. They were black gates when you left out there. And I'll never forget, I thought to myself, what am I gonna do different? What am I gonna do different? And I made a decision when I left there. I want to do something different. I want to see something different in my life because I was tired of being depressed.
Gotcha.
And when I left, I found myself starting an EA chapter in Beaufort, South Carolina, where I was living. And when I started that, it started me on my journey of always being what I wanted to be, and that was to help people.
Right.
Either become a therapist or a social worker or whatever. But you remember what I said, originally I said I was going to want to be a social worker. But it didn't pan out that way. I ended up becoming a mental health therapist.
So you becoming a mental health therapist, do you believe it's because of your past, the abuse you went through, the depression, anxiety? What drove you to want to be a mental health therapist?
I like helping people.
Okay.
I've always liked helping people. Even when I was being abused myself, I've always had that soft spot for other people. I've always had it. And so, but I didn't know how to get there. Didn't know how to get there. I knew it was long work. It was a lot of work that was involved in it, but I didn't know how, because it's not like I came from a family where we had people that were college graduates.
Right.
We didn't have that. We were just regular blue-collar workers.
Right.
Even though my mother was a nurse, I remember when she went to school, because I was a small child next door to my next door neighbor's house, and they would watch me until my mother came back. My mother actually was raised at a orphanage, a Catholic orphanage, so she didn't have the best upbringing herself. So I remember her going to nursing school. She was just an LPN, but you know, I was like, did I really want to become a nurse? I even thought about that at one point, but no, I didn't. But I didn't know how I was going to do it. I knew always what I wanted to do. I love helping people, but I didn't know how I was going to get there.
And you went to college late.
I did. I was about 29 years old.
Wow.
I raised my boys. Actually, when my baby finally came from out of daycare and he finally went to kindergarten, I'll never forget, I was crying. I was going, oh my gosh, my baby. And he got on the school bus and I got in the car and I headed straight to college.
Wow.
Took my first college course.
Awesome. And we'll be back with Dr. Bridgette.